Welcome everyone to Learning Each Week with Semester 12, and before we begin the series, Learning a Letter in Cursive a Week, we need to begin addressing some of the points, and what some of those points are is the pros and cons of Cursive. And one of the pro side of Cursive is the elegant handwriting that it presents or displays. For example, if I were to write the word hello in this case, we can see how neatly done or how well it was written in comparison to a printed version of hello. And that would be the right option. Now the right option, although it's quite plain, there's no style to it from my own perspective in comparison to the left side option, which is hello in cursive. Now the con side of it is that it takes a lot of time to get the letters perfect, and when we all first started, or when we all first start out writing cursive, it won't be perfect, and of course it's gonna look something like this. Oh no, that's a bit too well done. Something like this, perhaps. Basically, it's all squiggly line and not on point. Now, the second point for the pro side is, as Tom Berger's article, What We Lose with the Decline of Cursive, mentions a study that was done or shows how cursive can help with hand-eye coordination. When I reflect upon this part, I think it's quite true because it leads to the skill analyzing in details or detail orientation. So I think that's a good aspect to have, or a good characteristic, good trait to have in particular, because we need to use that in our everyday lives, especially if we are fixing machines or cooking a new dish. It requires attentive to details and being detail oriented. Now the third point for writing in cursive is that you can take notes in a faster pace, and especially if you're in a lecture where the lecturer or the professor would talk so fast like a machine gun. Basically, you would have to make sure that you have every single word down so that you don't miss anything or take it out of context. The con side of cursive that I found quite interesting was the time consumption, because it requires time and also patience, not to mention endurance. Without endurance, we would all quit immediately. However, it takes time, and that is why we have practice. Practice makes perfect. And I want to thank my older cousin who gave me a whole pile of handouts for cursive, because I was then able to trace the lines to make sure that I got the ink or the pen on point. So for instance, if I had to trace back can, I can then trace the line until it matches what the handout says. So if this is can, then I'll trace it out as can. Because keep that in mind. So don't give up. And the con side, or the second point for cons, is that it's less understandable. Sometimes we don't even understand what we're writing when we're writing in a rapid pace. For example, we write adjacent, and I am not able. It takes me a lot more effort to decipher what I'm even writing. For instance, I can tell that there's an A, I can possibly tell there's a J, and a little bit of a D, and then possibly an N and T, but I can't figure out what is in between. So that is why rapid writing can lead to less legible words. Now, the fourth point for the pro side, it just really depends on how well the signature is done, and it can lead to a lower chance of forgery. And each and every signature has its own characteristics, and it can be easily identifiable. Now, the fun fact about it is that it only takes a mark for the signature portion of a contract to be deemed legible, because there is another witness involved. It's mainly between you and the other party. So, for instance, if Carol decides not to write her full name, she can just write out C. And I don't have anything against Carol, so just a heads up on there. Now, to be honest, I think if someone who was looking to rewrite the signature that Carol had in mind, it could be easily done. It'll probably just take some time to retrace. However, in my case, I'm not really able to do so because sometimes it's pretty inconsistent with what I'm thinking of. Now, another question that comes up quite often, and I thought about this for a couple days in particular, is when did cursive started? That's the most interesting part, and we will be tracing back through the rich history of cursive in this case. Jenny Cohan, who wrote A Brief History of Penmanship on National Handwriting Day from history.com, states, borrowing aspects of the Etruscan alphabet. Now, the Etruscan civilization was located on the northwestern part of Italy. And continuing on with the quote, the ancient Romans were among the first to develop a written script for transaction and correspondence. The two phrases that I liked or cherry-picked from the common Latin words and phrases we use in English by Elizabeth Track, I think is quite relatable to all of us in some ways. For example, one of the words that I found interesting was ad nauseam. So ADNAUSEAM, a Latin phrase. Now, what does that mean? Ad nauseam means to the point of sickness. And a good example that Elizabeth Track gave was listening to the same song all over again, or over and over again in a repetitious motion, or repetition in this case. And some of us can relate to this, such as Friday from Rebecca Black, Baby from Justin Bieber, 1,000 Miles from Vanessa, and the list continues on. That also leads to another phrase that we commonly use today. And an example of it is a friend of yours who brags about what he has bought recently. For example, I recently bought a Lamborghini, a Maserati, a Tesla, a house, some fish from Pike Market, an IKEA desk, and the list continues on. And the Romans in particular had a very good solution to it. And that's why I find them quite ingenious in this case, which was to use the word etc. Etc. meaning the long list that continues on and must be solved at one point. So, when you have a friend, or when there's a friend involved, where they continue on with a long list of whatever they are bragging about. You can just use the word etc. So for example, so I bought a Lamborghini, a Maserati, a house, and etc. That would quickly end the conversation with that, because I think some of us are already know that is at the point of sickness or ad nauseum in this case. Now, continue on from the Romans itself. Later on, King Charlemagne would then be involved, where he was the king of France and ruled most of Western Europe at that time during the 5th century, if I'm not mistaken, and the 15th century actually. But you can also fact check that definitely on history.com, and I'll also provide all the links to it. And what happens is that at the same time they help preserve the Christian tradition. Hence, during the period, by empowering his people through academia and culture, this also helped to the development of a new style called the Carolingian minuscule, which is the first equally spaced words, and they're fairly large in my own opinion, and it helped us decipher what words are what words, or what letters are what letters. For example, the W from the M. And this will then, as Jenny Cohen would later on point out, that technology would then continue to advance, and hence leading to the revolt from the Italian humanists, who then later on created italics, that then became the modern cursive. Now, the interesting part about it is that from the period of the Romans onwards to the 1800s, it was considered a status symbol for many. And during the 1700s, in order to officiate documents, you would need to learn penmanship, and that requires you to practice your own signature and also creating the documents itself, and that is the crucial part of it. And that's why we have the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the balance of checks, etc. Now, to continue forward with that, in the early 1800s, that's when it became more standardized or democratized. So basically now everyone is being taught how to write in cursive. And this also leads to the very last point. Why did it decline? Now, the fun fact about it is that starting from the time of the Chinese civilization, they were able to invent the wooden block printing press, in which they were able to print out currency and also their own newspaper press, etc., or even notifications or basically announcements that they can place. So for example, if you need a wanted poster, they will print out the wanted poster and they'll have it glued on the wall so that everyone would crowd around it just to see who they need to catch in order to receive the reward. And unfortunately, the Mongols invaded China, so they took that technology, which then was utilized, or which some of the Europeans found quite interesting. That led to the Gutenberg press, which Gutenberg was born in Mainz, Germany, that was later exiled to Strasbourg, France, and then he created or enhanced the printing press with the metal blocks. Now, with that in mind, that's why they came up with the Gothic font, or is considered the black letters. And that is why some of the Italian humanists revolted, because it's considered barbaric in their own perspective, which sabotages the art of calligraphy in some ways. So that's why they created italics. And then it'll proceed on with the typewriter, and then finally the computer, which now the computer makes it obsolete, makes the cursive obsolete, because they already have the fonts all included, Times New Roman, and many more to come. So that is why it led to the decline of cursive. And now what? Now, the reason why we also have, in order to then perfect our signatures, we need to learn the history, the pros and cons about it, so that we can then stay motivated in some ways. And that's how it has motivated me to the point of writing in cursive, and there are friends who also inspire me to do so as well. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and we will proceed on with the letter A, or the alpha letter A, in the upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. And the links for the 3 articles will be listed under the description below. And please leave a like and subscribe for further new content, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next video.